After 26 years of waiting for baseball to change its mind, Pete Rose finally received his long-awaited answer, and it's certainly not what he hoped for. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred has never made it more clear than he did Monday that Pete Rose will not only remain on baseball's ineligible list, but also that his status will never change as long as Rose is alive. So he will never be employed by a major league or minor league organization again in his life. Stephen A., is this fair or foul?
Well, to me, it's incredibly unfair. That's been my position, and I know that my man Skip Bayless is diametrically opposed to my position. That's why we do the show that we do, because we usually don't think alike. We don't agree on a lot of different things, and that's fine. I want to state for the record, Skip and Molly, that in no way am I trying to absolve Pete Rose from what he did. We know that Pete Rose gambled on baseball. We know that it's the cardinal rule. Signs are up there, Rule 21, prohibiting gambling on the sport of baseball, you know, put there by Peter Ueberroth, a former commissioner of Major League Baseball. We understand all of that. We know that Pete Rose is a pathological liar. We know that he has been that way for quite some time. We also know that he was a gambling addict. We know his treatment towards the late Bart Giamatti, his conduct during the investigation didn't help matters. Special counsel John Dowd, Faye Vincent, former commissioner, we know how they all feel. We know how egregious Pete Rose's acts were. Nobody's trying to defend that. My issue, and why I believe this is foul, is because this is the United States of America. And I simply challenge folks out there, whether it be Dowd or anybody else, I would simply ask them this question. While no one is questioning the veracity of their information, the facts that they presented, Pete Rose is clearly in no position morally, ethically, or just from a common sense perspective to deny anything that they have put forth. I ask a simple question, and that is this: where is your compassion? Where's your decency? The man has been gone from the sport for 26 years. He is 74 years old. He is a three-time, three-time champion, 17-time All-Star, all-time hits leader. By the way, I never heard about Major League Baseball giving the money back that he helped generate for the sport when he was performing, whether it was winning championships with the Reds or the Phillies, whether it was him chasing Joe DiMaggio's single-season consecutive hit streaks, consecutive games hit streak with 56. He stopped at 44. The list goes on and on as it pertains to the accolades that this man put forth throughout his illustrious career, a career spanning about 24 years, in which he batted over 316 times. And he had a lifetime batting average of 303. I understand that you want to look at him and you want to say, this guy was a despicable human being. Well, we all know there's plenty of despicable human beings that are in the Hall of Fame. They may not have gambled on baseball, fair enough, but they were despicable nevertheless. And in a society where we forgive so many people for doing so many egregious things, it's one thing to lack compassion. It's another thing entirely to be so flagrant with it, so unapologetic about it, coming across as if you are so holier than thou. I listen to folks talk about Pete Rose, and it just blows my mind, because what we can't deny is what he did on a baseball field. Yeah, he bet on baseball. He bet on baseball as a player manager, as Outside the Lines revealed last June on their reports, which obviously influenced Commissioner Rob Manfred. We knew before then he probably had bet on baseball as a manager for the Cincinnati Reds, although he didn't bet against his team, so he says. Nobody believes it. But in the end, what it comes down to is the credentials. The Hall of Fame credentials speak for itself. And by Rob Manfred refusing to reinstate Pete Rose back into the sport of Major League Baseball, he's essentially ensuring, although he directly has nothing to do with it because he doesn't have that authority, he basically is ensuring that he will never be acknowledged as a Hall of Famer. When one could make the argument, all you got to do is induct him into the Hall of Fame and tell the good and the bad about him, but still acknowledge him for the great player that he was. The fact that they're trying to erase that history, I find incredibly egregious, uncompassionate, and dare I say anti-American. I'm sad today for Pete Rose because I think any human being deserves better than what he's getting based on his transgression. If he was a murderer, that's different. But based on his transgression, I think it's despicable what they're doing.
Despicable.
Yes, I do. I use that word.
Definitely diametrically opposed here. I don't have a drop of sadness for Pete Rose. This man, let's start with this. The recent evidence offered by Outside the Lines that this man did, in fact, bet on baseball as a player. There was always the issue of, I only bet when I was managing, which I found egregious enough in and of itself. But now, player and manager. And in those days, no internet gambling, so you're betting with illegal bookmakers. You are dealing with bad people who could do bad things to you, especially if you happen to fall into debt with said bookmakers. It's why there is a Rule 21 to guard the very integrity and credibility of the sport. And trust me, those bookmakers back in his playing days watched carefully when Pete did not bet on his team on a certain pitcher who was pitching that day because it signaled them, aha, he might not think they can win today. It's bad business. And before I proceed, let me quote the great Bob Nightingale in USA Today, in which he points out, it's no secret why there has never been another known player who has gambled on baseball since Rose's suspension. He became the poster player for Rule 21. This is why you don't break this rule. And it put the fear of God in every player since he was suspended and banned. And then we look at what's happened lately. Let's just look at the timeline here. Did Pete ever, to your point about how sorry you feel for him, did he ever come completely clean about his gambling? In the formation of the Dow Report? No, he did not. He came clean to try to sell a book. That was the first time he came clean, but not all the way clean. Longer bets on baseball, then amended that and clarified later in the conversation, yeah, I still bet on baseball. Really? So we want to lift the ban on that man? And remember, Stephen A., the ban doesn't mean he's banned from life. He's not locked up. It's not un-American because he's allowed to participate in any ceremonial baseball activity. He's allowed to be an analyst on Fox, obviously. He's allowed to go hawk his signature at every Cooperstown Hall of Fame week, sets up shop there, sets up shop in an office in Vegas and autographs his memorabilia. He has some of his memorabilia at the Hall of Fame, but not a plaque because we're not going to cross that line. And I'm glad a statement needed to be made now and forevermore. No. And that's what Pete Rose stands for. And how could you feel sorry for that?
Well, first of all, because I think you're missing the boat here, to be quite honest with you. And once again, I'm going to reiterate the word despicable, and I'll tell you why. Skip Bayless, in Rob Manfred's statement yesterday, Giamatti's investigation with John Dowd, and ultimately Faye Vincent obviously got involved and what have you. During that period of time, what they wanted was they were willing to give Pete Rose some kind of a break if indeed he had admitted what he was doing and also acknowledged that he had a problem because he was perceived as being a gambling addict. So my point to you, what addict do you know comes clean unless they're absolutely forced to? Alcoholics, drug addicts, the list goes on and on. They fight to the death. They try to die with the lie, per se, if they can get away with it. We all know that. So you're willing to admit that it was, meaning them, Skip Dowd and those guys. They're willing to admit that it was an addiction. They're willing to admit that it was a problem, okay? So we're sitting here and we give breaks and throw mulligans to folks that have problems all the time. But when it comes to Pete Rose, we don't want to do that. Why? Because he's despicable and unlikable. Well, last time I checked, Mark McGwire was considered relatively despicable before he was chasing Roger Maris's single-season home run record. Then somebody in PR, whomever, got together with them, told him, you got to embrace this. This is good for you. It's good for baseball. And what he did in lying his way to that single-season home run record, all juiced up and all of this other stuff, trying to act like it was just an andro supplement in his locker or on his locker stall. He sat up there, hugged the Roger Maris family, hoodwinked the sport of baseball and everybody else, allowed them to ride his coattails, knowing he was cheating. Okay? What he does? He gets a hitting job. A job as a hitting coach in Major League Baseball when the great Tony La Russa decides to bring him back in. It was only after he sat down and talked to Major League Baseball via Bob Costas that all of that ultimately transpired. I'm saying that I don't have a problem with it, but we seem to be very arbitrary in who we're willing to forgive and why we're willing to forgive them. Whether you like Pete Rose or not should be irrelevant. His behavior should be irrelevant. At the end of the day, it's what he did, it's about how egregious it was, and it's the fact that now, 26 years later, do you believe the message has been sent and received loud and clear that there should be no gambling in baseball? I think we would all acknowledge we've received the message. So now it comes down to, at 74 years of age, where is your compassion? You got Major League Baseball players all over the place that are sitting there and say, nobody makes any excuse or apologies for Pete Rose. What the players say is, we got the message. Damn. Can y'all have some kind of compassion for the man? That's what they're saying. I don't have a problem with that.
I don't think the old-time players think that. And by the way, did he go fix?
What? The old-time players think what?
That we should show compassion for him.
They think that?
They do not think that. I don't know if you're talking about
they do not think that.
Yeah.
They do not think that, but other players today think so.
Okay. All right, but they don't know. They haven't studied this, I don't believe. But here's the point. To your point, did Pete Rose try to fix his gambling problem? Not to my knowledge, not to baseball's knowledge.
Said no credible evidence of a reconfigured life.
Like that was the operative word. Did he try to reconfigure his life? Did he show contrition? Did he show any remorse? According to our new commissioner, not a drop. And he finally just said, I'm sorry, I can't go there.
But look at what they're trying to accomplish here, Skip. If Pete Rose is asking for you to reinstate him and him be employed in the sport of Major League Baseball, we can go back and forth as to, based on his present behavior, whether you want that to happen. That's fair. But what we're really speaking about here is a process that facilitates the acknowledgement of his greatness as a valid Hall of Famer. And anything that impedes that is what I'm averse to. I'm saying 4,256 hits, a lifetime 303 batting average, 17 All-Stars.
Nobody doubts
that. There is no doubt. I'm saying there is no doubt. No. So what they're trying, understand, Skip, what they're trying to accomplish here. What they're trying to say is, because he bet on baseball, we want you to forget that he ever existed. And over time, if he's never acknowledged, you will never, I'm talking about young people on the come up. Skip, they'll never know who Pete Rose was, because Major League Baseball essentially is trying to disavow any knowledge of this man's Hall of Fame greatness. That's my belief. And that's what I have a problem with.
I mean,
yeah, they are.
The stats are the stats.
What's the Hall of Fame
they stand
for?
By themselves.
What's the Hall of Fame for? Hold on. I've never seen Babe Ruth. I wasn't born when he was playing. I don't know all about him.
I know all the numbers.
But we know all about him. In part because he was so great as a player, they acknowledged his greatness with Hall of Fame credentials. You don't see that. If you're not in the Hall of Fame, chances are you could potentially be forgotten. I know in today's age, social media and beyond, people say they'll never forget you. But in the end, if the Major League Baseball is not willing to validate and acknowledge your greatness, your performance, the objective is for you to be forgotten. But they never gave that money back that man helped generate for that sport. They exploited and profited off of him.
Well,
now you want to forget him.
He got paid a lot.
It's not right.
Okay.
It's not right.
All right, last
it's not
quick
right.
point.
There's no compassion.
I got to make this point, because when you talk about despicable human being, I got to tell you, I actually covered a portion of that hitting streak you're talking about when he got to 44 games going after DiMaggio's 56 in 1978. As great an interview as I ever encountered in my whole career. Just engaging, disarming, always completely accessible. Anybody who ever has interviewed Pete Rose will tell you he's a great guy to interview. I love to interview him, so you got to separate the two. He's gotten miles and miles out of his personality. Anybody who comes into contact with him loves him. And I still think a lot of people still know him as Charlie Hustle, and he has a place in a lot of hearts, at least of the Reds fans.
I'm talking about a younger generation.
Okay.
I'm talking about a younger generation on the come up, and more importantly, just as important, Skip, is this. I find it ironic that we're even having this argument when you consider the fact that Major League Baseball supports fantasy sports, which in some way is gambling as well.
That's a whole nother thing.
I'm just saying, it just amazes me.
Okay,
it just amazes me.
Now you've opened a whole nother can of worms, and we probably don't have time to get into it. We'll do that later.
Yes, we don't.
Sure.
I think it's apples and oranges, but that's just me.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Great debate, guys. Pete Rose will speak today at his Sports Bar and Grill in Vegas at 2 p.m. Eastern regarding, obviously, this issue. We head back to the NFL up next. Panthers strike a pose after clinching a first-round bye, and their coach doesn't seem to have a problem with it. But to Skip and Stephen A., we'll get into that when we come back.